Everybody, thank you again for joining me in this segment we call Windy City Sports Podcast. My name's Mike Hansa. With me, as always, is Tommy Doherty. Tommy, how we doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. It's an honor. It's a pleasure. I would call it a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Good. I like the combining of terms here.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like bad cologne, like Calvin Klein presents pleasure. Only for men.
Well,
it's good to be back.
Yeah, I'm glad we're doing this. First of all, I loved your Halloween show at Brixie's.
Oh, thank you, man. Thanks a lot.
The band's costumes were phenomenal. The covers of all the songs. My favorite was Taylor Swift.
Yes, we covered Shake It Off by Taylor Swift.
Shake It Off was great, man. I was shaking it for sure.
Yeah, a lot of people were surprised that I sang that one. So thanks for anybody that came out. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So, anyways, while we're here, let's get into it. We're going to start off with this team that we love to talk about called the Chicago Bears.
Bear down.
Exactly. So the Bears have a record of 2-5 right now. Good for fourth in the division. I mean, what do you make of the play so far this year? Besides the 26-0 loss to Seattle and that 48-23 loss to Arizona, the Bears actually look pretty good, losing games, their other three games, 23-20 to the Vikings, 37-34 to the Lions, and 31-23 to the Packers. So with the Bears season right now, what do you make of it?
Great question, Mike. So at the beginning of the season and the preseason, you and I specifically on this podcast discussed how tough their schedule was at the beginning of the year.
Right.
So I think if you were to ask us at the time, hey, do you see this team going 2-5 during the first 7 games? I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation going in. So I agree that they have played a little better than I expected. We didn't think they would be the worst team in the league.
No.
And that certainly hasn't been true. The last 2 games have sort of gotten away from them with Detroit and Minnesota, but overall, my expectation was that they would get better every week and, it wouldn't be a winning season. And so far, that's been the case.
That has been. And we're fighting injuries. We have Kevin White. He's nowhere to be found so far on the PUP list. Alshon Jeffrey's been battling injuries. And now Matt Forte goes down, too. What do you think of the Bears, too, with all these injuries and this next man up mentality so far? It's
definitely been a rough year injury-wise. Obviously, Cutler seems to get an annual injury. Came much earlier this year. The big one is Forte because of everything he does for the offense, not only just running the football, but he's been the team's leading receiver for several years.
Exactly.
And really underrated in pass protection, one of the best in the game. So that's a crushing loss. They've dealt with them about as well as they could for a team that has very little depth to begin with. So, it's a tough situation for any team to be in, I guess.
So with Forte out right now with this knee injury, Jeremy Langford, the rookie out of Michigan State, is stepping in. Couple things. One, do you think Langford has this next man up mentality and he can fill in Forte's shoes? And also, does this look like the end of the Forte era in your eyes and maybe the start of a Jeremy Langford era?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. One, I think anybody that picked up Jeremy Langford in fantasy this week that's expecting him to be Matt Forte is probably going to be disappointed. This is a guy who's more of a traditional downhill runner. He wasn't known for catching passes in college. He's looked fine in spurts, so I think he's going to be a solid fill-in for now and possibly the back of the future, given how these next couple games go. But he's not going to just immediately replace what Forte does.
Very true. I agree as well. Like you said, the things that don't show up on the stat sheets, like Forte's pass protection amongst everything else, is so important to the Bears, especially to Jay Cutler when pass protection is something that man needs with his inability to scramble out of the pocket. So we'll see what happens. Like we said, only time's going to tell. We have been lucky with all these other injuries, how we have been able to go forth and fight through them.
Yeah, I think one thing also about Langford to keep in mind is that, he's going to have a lot of pressure on him if Cutler goes down again. So hopefully they use him in a way that's going to be efficient and open up the passing lanes for guys like Jeffrey and Bennett, especially these next few games. I mean, they're playing San Diego, St. Louis, and Denver. Those teams have pretty stout defenses, so it's going to be important to establish the run.
Yeah, I agree. What about Jay Cutler? How about his play? Right now he's got 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, about an 88 QBR this season. If we look at these numbers, even compared to the past couple seasons he's had with the Bears, they're very, very similar, but it is a different Jay Cutler we're seeing. Would you agree with that?
I would say that Jay Cutler has surprised me in the sense that he's a lot more mobile than I remember him being. Mm-hmm. One of the things that Adam Gase, the offensive coordinator, did that I thought was pretty smart was actually highlight this, especially in the first game against Green Bay. You saw a lot of design runs, or at least plays that were designed to get Jay getting on the move.
Yeah,
which is really smart. Actually, I didn't think that at his age he was still able to do that, but it was a smart thing to do. And I would say that he has looked probably the most conservative he's looked since he's been with the Bears. But that being said, it's still mostly the same results.
Yeah.
Because that's just who Jay Cutler is at this point.
It is.
But it hasn't been a total train wreck yet. So
yeah, no more, especially when we look at the interceptions and turnovers in the red zone, when we get down there. Mm-hmm. I'm glad to see we get down there, and at least when we are in the red zone, it is a score and not a Cutler interception or a pick six for that matter.
Right, exactly.
So these players, you can also see they want to play for these coaches. You know, you have John Fox come in, like you said, Adam Gase, Vic Fangio. How about the other side of the football? What do you think these players are doing for Vic Fangio? I know we aren't really that great of a defensive team, but then again, you're looking, who else do we have besides Kyle Fuller in an actual role? So what is your expectations, and have they been up to the standards to this Bears defense so far?
Well, first of all, I want to apologize for saying that Kyle Fuller was a guy you could build your defense around on the last podcast, because that is simply not true.
It's not.
He hasn't had a great year.
It's that sophomore slump.
He's really disappointed me overall. That said, I think Pernell McPhee has worked out great.
Yeah.
He looks like a real solid player, maybe not a Pro Bowl type, but a guy that you could rely on going forward for sure. And, the rest of the defense is still young, and they're still trying to get better. You've got guys like Ego Ferguson, guys like Sam Acho, Christian Jones. I mean, they're doing their best. But
Sam Acho has actually been my surprise player on the defensive side.
Yeah.
He has looked great so far. I mean, a guy who I honestly did not even know going into this season, and then at outside linebacker, he has really stepped up and made some great plays, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a credit to Vic Fangio as a coach that he can get some of these performances out of guys that you really had no exposure to or hadn't heard of. Something that the former regime was pretty inept at doing.
Yeah, we all know your favorite last year.
Good old Mel Tucker. What's he up to these days, Mike?
You know, I don't even want to give that man the time of day to give him a Google search. So your guess is probably better than mine. Because
someone write into the podcast and let us know what Mel Tucker's doing.
Please email us and let us know if he's alive, if he's doing football, if he's cooking at a restaurant. Because they all seem like pretty good options to me. So the Bears play the Chargers, like we said, next Sunday.
Monday night, actually.
Or Monday night, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
You're definitely right about that. So I'm also going to talk about, we'll move on to the NFL here. You got 4 undefeated teams right now. The Bengals are 8-0. The Panthers are 7-0. The Broncos are 7-0. And the Patriots are 7-0. One, do you think these are the best 4 teams in the NFL right now? And 2, who is your MVP through this halfway point right now?
Great questions. This is the first time I can remember there being this many undefeated teams left over. And really, there's only one team that stands out amongst those 4, and I hate to say it, but it's New England. They've thoroughly handled everyone they've played so far, and they really just look like the only complete force all around. Because, I mean, let's look at the other 3 undefeateds. You've got the Broncos, who have the best defense in the league by far.
Easily.
But oddly enough, the offense is the one that's holding them back, and oddly enough, it's Peyton Manning, the future Hall of Fame quarterback, that seems to be the question mark for them going forward.
Also, you got to realize, too, this running game, the expectations that were set so high for C.J. Anderson, everybody, for your fantasy, you had him as a first-round pick, and even some people thought he was the number 1 pick overall, which, my God, if you did that, bless your soul.
Wow.
But, yeah, like you said, this offense, I'm looking at all these stats compared to Maurice Thomas, Peyton Manning's, and the other wideout, Emmanuel Sanders. It's compared to last year, even 2 years ago, my expectations are way far down. And if they did not have this Broncos defense, if it was the same Broncos defense they had last year, 2 years ago, this record would be completely different. So.
Yeah, and it just kind of goes to my point that although they're undefeated, they've had a lot of close calls. I mean, that first week, they win against Baltimore on the last drive of the game.
Yep.
They win against Kansas City thanks to a Jamal Charles fumble with, seconds to go in the fourth quarter. They had to beat Cleveland in overtime. So, they're undefeated, but it's been, a lot of scrappy and a lot of comeback wins. But having said that, I think in the AFC they probably give New England their best challenge because looking at the other undefeated team in that conference, Cincinnati, also 8-0.
Yeah.
Certainly more impressive than they've been in years past, but
especially with the way Andy Dalton's play, would you agree?
Yeah, and they did a really smart thing with Andy Dalton was they capitalized on his genius-like pre-snap reads. I mean, this is a guy in college who completed 80% of his passes.
Yeah.
So basically what they decided was, well, this guy stinks when he's got to hold the ball for more than 3 seconds, so let's just make him get rid of it immediately, which sounds like an insult, but for a guy who's as good at reading defenses pre-snap as he is, it's actually worked out. But at the end of the day, this is still a Marvin Lewis coach team, a team that's looking for their first playoff win in the entire era of Marvin Lewis. So, I'm a little bit skeptical about them come playoff time, but you got to give credit where credit's due. They're 8-0. They've beaten teams on the road. They've had comebacks, and Carlos Dunlap has finally had the year we thought he could be possible of. So.
Very true. I'm gonna give you my pick right now, who I think is the best team. They're not one of the undefeated teams, and they actually have more than one loss. It's the Arizona Cardinals at 6-2.
Really?
I think they are the team you need to watch out for. The only 2 losses, they played a good Rams team, losing 24-22. They lost to your beloved Steelers 25-13.
Sure did.
But even I'm looking at all these other games, they have manhandled most of their teams that they played. They're beating the Saints by 31-19, the Bears 48-23, 49ers 47-7. So we'll see with these upcoming weeks. They play a tough Seattle at Seattle. And then they play the Bengals at home. That's my game of the year so far. So that will really determine if these Cardinals and these Bengals team, which is the team to look out for moving forward.
I'll make a counterpoint to Arizona as the best team in the NFC because while they have obliterated most of their opponents haven't been very good so far.
Very true.
So I would say right now the best team in the NFC, which I would impart on you as a wide-open conference, is probably still Green Bay.
Yeah.
Now, granted, Carolina also one of the undefeated teams remaining. They look fantastic as well. Cam Newton really coming into his own.
He is.
By the way, who are his receivers? Oh, that's right. Nobody. Except for Kelvin Benjamin, who's out for the season.
Yeah.
So they're riding it with their defense and with Newton, who's essentially a running back who is also a quarterback.
Yeah.
But Green Bay, to me, is still the best because they have Aaron Rodgers, and they still have a stout receiving core. They haven't looked great lately, but I'm willing to bet you that they turn this around by the end of the year and are probably the last team standing when it's all said and done.
I would agree. I would say as the season goes on, I would almost compare the Green Bay Packers to a Michigan State basketball team. Tom Izzo, when they always go into the tournament, you always find them in the Final Four of the Elite Eight. Mm-hmm. And that's how the Packers are, too. They always get better as the season goes on. So I will agree, but we'll see with this season going forward. Also, while we are in the NFL, what do you make of all these injuries that are going on? You have Le'Veon Bell, he's out. Reggie Bush goes down. Steve Smith goes down. All in the same week. Matt Forte, of course, Jordy Nelson. Do you think, I read an interesting article Brady Quinn put, and me and my dad have actually been talking about it for some time, with all these chemicals they're putting into their body, this HGH and so forth. Do you think that has any effect on their muscles and wearing and tearing, tightening them up and causing them to tear it?
So let's unpack this for a minute. First of all, the injuries from last week were excruciating. And it's unfortunate that we happen to like a sport where injuries are just going to happen all the time. There was a huge rash of them. I think that's just how the sport, unfortunately, is.
Yeah.
As for whether or not it's related to HGH, they don't have a very strict testing policy for HGH in the NFL's Player Association Agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be a possibility. I'm not going to rule it out. But I just think that the way sports science works now, we have reached potentially the limit of what human beings are physically capable of.
I mean, when you look at these men compared to what they used to be, it's unreal.
Yeah.
If you were to tell me someone like Megatron at his height, his speed, or even if you look at these linemen at their size and speed, it's like you said, you would never have thought someone could get to this point, almost a Hercules. Which they are.
Well, it's like, why do you think these guys are tearing Achilles and ligaments in their knees?
And also putting in these protocol with hitting a hitless receiver, because these guys are just getting hit and hit hard, for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, there are people far smarter than I that have done, scientific studies about, how much you can physically handle in your body. And I think that has a lot to do with it, too. But to Brady Quinn's point, I'm sure there are guys that are taking those drugs every single day and getting away with it.
Yeah.
Unfortunate, but especially because I had Keenan Allen on my fantasy team.
I did, too, and that's a shame what happened to him.
Yeah, he was having a great year. He was actually on pace to shatter the record for catches in a season. He had the record through week 8, if I believe. I think it was 62 catches.
62.
Yeah, what a shame.
We'll see here. But let's go on to while we are on football, let's move to the other side. And we're going to go ahead and talk about Notre Dame real quick.
Cheers for old Notre Dame.
Hey. So the theme of Notre Dame this year is the next man up mentality. When you have guys like Malik Zaire going down for the season in week 2, and of course you have Terrian Folsted, who I said was going to be a Heisman candidate, going down. But then these guys step up, such as C.J. Procise and Deshaun Kaiser, and my God, have they been outstanding this year. You have C.J. Procise, who has 11 touchdowns and 947 yards on 143 carries. He looks unstoppable. The man is running through all these teams, even a good Clemson's defense, and I would give USC credit too, where they deserve. But because these expectations, especially coming from him, you didn't think, I'm very happy with the play. And of course, Deshaun Kaiser steps up when Malik Zaire goes down. And even he's a very double threat quarterback with his ability to throw and run. He's got 11 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in the air, but another 5 touchdowns on the ground and 318 yards. So with Notre Dame, with your starting running back and quarterback, 2 of your most key positions being 7-1, I would say I would be very happy with that. They came off a really big win against an undefeated Temple. They prove themselves there. They go against Pittsburgh, Wake Forest, and Boston College, and then what's really going to determine that we'll get into in a second with this college football playoff is they play Stanford to end the year at Stanford, and two things need to happen in order for Notre Dame to continue to be in the hunt for this college football playoff. Is not only do they have to win out before they beat Stanford, is Stanford needs to win out too. So two key things we'll see. But let's go on and talk about this college football playoff. The first ranking just came out. What are your takes out of this right now?
So, first of all, I will say that I agree with everything you said about Notre Dame fighting through adversity. I certainly didn't think that they could last the way they have. That being said, I think that they got a little bit too much credit in the rankings, which, to recap, the college football playoff rankings work where a committee of people chosen by the NCAA, they sit down once a week beginning in week 10, and they vote based on their own opinions of the teams, ranked 1 through 25. And the top 4 teams will go into a 4-team bracket that will be played on New Year's Eve this year. I don't know if you knew that. And they will play in 2 bowl games, and the winner of those games will play for the national championship. So the results this week for now are number 1, Clemson, number 2, LSU, number 3, defending champion Ohio State, and number 4, Alabama.
Yes.
And coming in right behind them was Notre Dame, Baylor, Michigan State, and TCU. So we can just focus on those 8 since those are the teams kind of in the mix.
Exactly.
My thoughts on the rankings are, first of all, a little surprised Clemson made the leapfrog to number 1.
Me too.
Although I think they are deserving. They've certainly played a tough schedule and have had enough requisite blowouts to strengthen some of the lesser teams.
With a big win over Notre Dame.
Big win over Notre Dame, which looks better and better for Notre Dame. Probably the reason they got ranked 5th.
I think so too.
I would say that right now LSU is probably my favorite amongst these 4 as the best, quote-unquote, best team. We're certainly going to find out the answer to that this weekend against Alabama, one of the big games of the year. And then Ohio State, I think they do deserve it. They're the defending champs. They've beaten everybody they've played. They actually have a better point differential than you would expect. It seems like they're kind of coasting these games. They're really not. But I don't have a problem with the 4. Tell me why you think Notre Dame should be ranked over Baylor.
So the reason what I realized that Notre Dame is over Baylor, one thing that is so important to this committee is strength of schedule.
Yeah.
And the Big 12 messed up big time last year by not having a Big 12 championship game. And then that's what screwed over the Big 12 in general. But if you look at it, so when the first college football rankings came off last year, don't panic if your team's not in it right now because Ohio State was number 16, I believe, last year. And then, of course, snuck their way in 4 and won the national championship. So a lot of it is, too, what the Big 12 was smart about this year is, granted, these teams, TCU is 8-0 and Baylor is 7-0, but they haven't played anybody right now. So strength of schedule is a huge thing, but the one thing that Big 12 was smart about is that they're upselling the Big 12 by making all their harder games at the very end of the year, so when they do play each other, they're ranked so high, which I think is very, very smart of the Big 12.
Yes, I was just about to bring that up. So, first of all, I'm going to defend Baylor for a second. These are the scores of Baylor's games this year.
Let me hear them.
66-31, 70-17, 63-35, 66-7, 62-38, 45-27, and 31-24.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so granted they haven't played as tough of a schedule as Notre Dame. There's no question about that. But they're about to get into the meat of their schedule. They're going to play Oklahoma, who's ranked 15th, and then they're on the road at number 14, Oklahoma State, who's undefeated, and the big showdown against TCU, also undefeated.
Yeah.
So I will say that if Baylor continues to win their games, they certainly will be in the top 4. probably near the top 1 or 2, deservingly so. But they've got to go through the gauntlet right now.
Exactly, and the same thing with TCU. I'm looking at TCU's schedule right now. Mm-hmm. You can argue with a 23-17 win over a tough Minnesota in the beginning of the year. They beat SFA 70-7, SMU 56-37. Texas Tech, they only won by 3, but I'll give Texas Tech credit when credit is due. They do look good this year, despite having the worst defense I've ever seen. They whooped Texas 50-7. They beat a good Kansas State team by a touchdown, and they whooped Iowa State and West Virginia team. But then again, like you said, they go to OK State at 14, Oklahoma, and then they finish the season against Baylor at home. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, they're buying. They want to sell high on these people when they do play, mm-hmm. and give them the highest ranking possible. So I do think it's smart. So, do I think that? Back to the original question,
sure.
Is Notre Dame's number 5 ranking deserving right now? Mm-hmm. I do. Mm-hmm. But I also think that depending on if these Baylor teams, these TCU teams, if they all win out, it's going to do nothing but just drive Notre Dame down, without a doubt. So you have to look, too, because you have 3 teams still undefeated in the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. You got Iowa at 8-0, Michigan State at 8-0, and Ohio State at 8-0. So I think the Big Ten still does deserve more credit that is due, especially when Ohio State goes and beats the Pac-12 and the SEC to win the national championship last year.
Honestly, if Notre Dame wants to be in the playoff, this is kind of what has to happen. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Alabama has to beat LSU this week.
Yeah.
Then I think they're going to need either Michigan State or Ohio State one of them is going to beat each other. And then I think they would actually need Iowa to beat one of them in the Big Ten, because there's a chance that Iowa could win the Big Ten and not leapfrog Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Although you could also flip it the other way by saying Iowa ran the table with their schedule and then beat a top 5 team. So either way, TCU and Baylor, one of them is going to knock each other out. Same with Ohio State and Michigan State. So it's still conceivable that Notre Dame could sneak in there, but it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and Notre Dame, they do need to beat Stanford. Stanford needs to win out. And also, Stanford is they're number 11 right now in the college football playoff, and Utah is 12, and they're both on the other side of that Pac-12. So when Notre Dame does beat Stanford, if they beat Stanford, Stanford also has to beat a Utah team. That's going to be another tough matchup, who is just as high as number 2 or 3?
Yeah, they were number 1, actually.
Number 1, point. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. But like I said, it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of this plays off, especially with these SEC matchups, LSU against Alabama. So they really do show a lot of love to these one-loss teams because, like you said, Notre Dame they do have a 1 loss. They're ahead of 4 teams that are undefeated, but that 1 loss is to that number 1 Clemson. So
yeah, and another thing too that could throw a monkey wrench in this entire thing is if the only 2 undefeated teams left are Clemson and Memphis. Does Memphis deserve to be included? I know it sounds like kind of facetious.
Well, isn't that part of the reason why this college football playoff was put into state? Because when you have a Boise State team who is undefeated, you remember the Statue of Liberty play to beat Oklahoma.
Who could forget?
Ian Johnson. Wow. Jeez.
Ian Johnson, that's a blast from the past.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
He's no Ian Robertson, though.
No Ian Robertson. No E-Dozer. But Memphis, who is 8-0, and if they do finish out, because let's see, how many we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We got 10 undefeated teams going on right now in college football.
It's not going to last.
It's not going to last.
That only helps Memphis.
Yeah. So, but let's say like you did, if Memphis does go undefeated, and there is maybe one other team that is undefeated, then yes, I think you have to put Memphis in the playoff because that is the main reason why this college football playoff happened.
And here's another thing that will anger a lot of Ohio State fans, but technically if Memphis runs the table, they will have beaten 3 ranked teams this year, which is 3 more ranked teams than Ohio State has beaten this year.
Yeah.
And they beat Ole Miss, who beat Alabama on the road, so Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't really see a scenario in which an undefeated Memphis wouldn't be in the conversation or very much in the top 4.
Yeah, but also Memphis, too, if they win out, they will have proven themselves because they play 2 very, very tough road games going against number 25 Houston and then Temple at number 22 put up that fight against Notre Dame.
Sure.
So if they can go ahead and beat those teams, win out and beat those 2 tough teams, then they are very, very deserving of that 1 through 4 seed in the college football playoff.
All right, well, Mike, let's put on the line. Who do you think is going to be in the playoff right now, today, on November 6th?
So, looking at it right now, my 4 teams, my God, I love Notre Dame, but they're going to be one of the first 2 out. I'm going to say it's going to be Ohio State, either Alabama or LSU. I'll give you 2 of those. And then I'm going to go with... let's get crazy here. Let's go with a Baylor, and then let's go with Memphis.
So you've got Clemson,
Ohio State, Memphis, and either Alabama or LSU.
Wow, that would be tasty, man.
So that's what I would like to see happen. That's what I want to happen too. So, like I said, Memphis has proven themselves so far to me with these teams over Ole Miss, who does beat the Alabama at number 4. So that'll be an interesting matchup to see what happens.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you got?
Yeah, so I'm going to stick with Clemson as well. I think that looking at the rest of their schedule, I don't see them losing another game.
Nope.
So they'll be in. I also think Ohio State will be in. I think they're a team that kind of plays up to the level of their opponent. I'm also not that impressed with Michigan State. So I'll stick with them. I'll also stick with LSU. And I will stick with Baylor, who's currently out of it, but I do think that they're going to run the table. I also think that TCU has a much worse defense, and that will eventually come to haunt them. So, nothing too bold about my picks, but the way I'm picking it, it's looking like we're going to have at least 4, if not 3, undefeated teams in the mix. So, at that point, no complaints from me. Unfortunately for Memphis fans, there would be some complaints. Hey, I'd love to see chaos too. That's just me right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to see too. And that's why I want to see, like I said, the reason why I want to see Memphis in is I want to see if this playoff football thing really is going to work out. And I want to see the underdog win and show anyone can happen.
And also, don't forget, the games are on New Year's Eve this year, not New Year's Day. So plan accordingly, I guess.
Well, let's go on and move here to the Chicago Cubs. So usually we say next year is our year.
Well, next year might actually be the year.
Next year might be the year, but even this year, people were saying, this is our year. Of course, you have all the magic going on with the Back to the Future reference.
Sure.
Telling to bet on the Cubbies. But let's go ahead and reflect real quick. The Cubs finished 97-65. They're the 4th best record in the MLB, and even though it was the 4th best record in the MLB, it was 3rd in the division. So they go ahead, they beat the Pirates in the wild card game, they beat the Cardinals 3-1, and lose to the Mets 4-0. So what do I take from this Cubs season? Do I take it as a disappointing season after you do go ahead and beat the Pirates and Cardinals? No, I look at it as the start to a bright future with all our young talent. It looks like we are going to lose Dexter Fowler, who was that leadoff hitter spot is so key. As Joe Madden always says, you go, we go as you go. And that seemed to be one of the themes of the Chicago Cubs is the play of Dexter Fowler. But then let's go and look at all this young talent that the Cubs have this year. You got Javier Baez. Even Starlin Castro is young in my eyes. We'll see his future. Chris Bryant, Jorge Soler, Chris Coughlin, beautiful eyes, Chris Bryant. I mean, the team looks unreal. Of course, Kyle Schwarber. We look great. I mean, and the best part is we have all these guys signed through for the next 5 years, which is looking very promising. And then, like I said, we'll lose Fowler, it's looking like, but I'm expecting in this offseason to see a reunite of Joe Madden and bringing in David Price.
Wow. Is that a real thing?
It's David Price is supposedly going to the Cubs. I'm going to knock on wood.
Oh, my goodness.
But because the Cubs have so much money to spend, they are able to spend, because all these guys are so young and they have them locked up, they're really not spending so much money as these Dodgers and everyone else is. So David Price, it's looking like his number one destination is this reuniting with Joe Madden. And that was a big problem with the Cubs, too, this year is, I know we had Arrieta, who will win the Cy Young. Lester, he did his thing. It was a big signing. But you have Hendricks and them. They didn't really do what they needed to do. So we're missing that third good starter to get us through. That can go at least 6 innings in my book. So if you bring David Price and your front 3 pitchers are David Price, Arrieta, and John Lester's your third pitcher in your rotation, then you're going to give all these other teams what I call hell.
I think a lot of people would call that hell as well.
Yeah. So,
I mean, just looking at it from a non-fan perspective, obviously the Cubs are in a really good spot right now because they're super young and they are ahead of schedule. And, a lot of people were comparing this team to the 08-09 Blackhawks that went on that surprise run.
So,
the young nucleus. But the difference with that is the Cubs don't need to break up their team every 3 years based on salary cap restrictions. They can literally just reload as much as they want as long as the Ricketts family is willing to sign the check. So,
and they have the money to do so.
Yeah, that's what really, as a Sox fan, kind of worries me because, the Cubs are going to be a destination of choice for a lot of free agents. And if you do get David Price as that guy, I mean, if Arrieta is even, 75% as good as he was last year, he's going to be great. And that's really just going to take your team to the next level.
Yeah, that's the main question, too, is what Arrieta did, especially after this All-Star break, was unbelievable. So, like you said, if Arrieta can just give me at least 75% of what he had last year, then I'm totally happy that.
Because you can't expect him to replicate that.
No,
ever.
No pitcher, I don't think, will ever do anything like he did after the All-Star break again. So, congratulations to the Royals for winning the World Series. Much deserving. I was very, very happy for them.
Shout out to all my friends from Kansas City who were thrilled at that. I mean, it's been 30 years. I think you've waited long enough.
Yeah, I mean, we've only waited 70 years longer as a fan. Real quick, though, I want to get your opinion on this. So, Theo Epstein and other managers, especially Theo, is making a big pitch for, 4 years ago, we didn't even have this MLB wild card playoff game. It was just, there was only one wild card winner through the regular season.
Yep.
Now you have the top 2 teams. They play one game. Do you think that they should, in fact, what Theo's pushing for is do a 3-game series of a wild card playoff? Because it is unfair for a team like the Pirates and the Cubs to have 2 out of the top 4 records in the MLB and get knocked out after one game.
Yeah, I do think it's unfair. Baseball is a sport of 162 games.
Exactly.
And you play games in series naturally. It's not like the NBA or hockey where, I mean, yes, technically you play teams multiple times, but you don't have a 3-game series with the Celtics to figure out who's going to, win your division. So I would be all for that. Now, is MLB going to do that? I don't know. But certainly it sucks for a team like the Pirates who, win the second most amount of games in baseball and then are out after one thing. The other thing that, people tend to forget about baseball is it's such a streaky sport.
It is.
Of all of the sports, I mean, maybe hockey is like the most like it, but it seems like whoever is just hot right at the end of the year has so much momentum, and one game, that's really not indicative of an entire season's worth of
especially too compared to like if you look at the NBA, you're usually looking at the same all-star team year after year after year, where in baseball your MVPs and your all-stars are all over the place.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, but yeah, I think it's a very deserving, and I think that the MLB will look into it because of the fact that it did happen this year with the Pirates and the Cubs. So we'll see going forward.
I mean, keep in mind, this is the same sport that still doesn't want to institute instant replay on a lot of their key calls. So we might be waiting until 2019 for this decision, Mike.
We'll see what happens first, the Cubs World Series or the wild card game.
Come on, baseball people. Let's get it together.
Let's go.
Sorry, Grandpa, if you're listening.
Jeez.
My grandpa doesn't even like baseball. I don't know why I said that.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Let's go on to bigger and brighter things, to what we call the Chicago Bulls.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
I've been waiting for this one.
I have too. I'm excited. Basketball season is one of my favorite seasons.
Before we get into this, can I just tell a quick anecdote about the Bulls?
Let me hear it.
So shout out to my friend Aaron Mawson, who hooked me up with really cheap Bulls tickets. On Sunday, I went to see them play the Magic.
Yeah.
So I go to the game, and it turns out the seats were in the last row of section
300 level?
Yep. Literally the last row of the stadium. In fact, so high up that our friend Matt Meindl and I were sitting in a row that had 2 regular seats and the rest were folding chairs. So it was like a makeshift row, essentially.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Bulls won the game, but the highlight of the game was these 4 people who were sitting like a row ahead of us, and every 20 minutes or so, out of nowhere, they would start doing this chant that I'm about to do right now. You ready?
Here.
Bulls, 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 Bulls. Yes, they did this, okay? And by the end, we were just dying of laughter. So
did any other people in your section catch on to the chant, or was it just these same 4 people doing it?
These same 4, and they were not doing it sarcastically at all. They were totally into it, and they thought it was really
the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, God bless those 4 people. But anyway, let's get into it, Mike.
So yeah, the Bulls are 4-2 right now. Of course, Tom Thibodeau's out. We have this coach named Fred Hoiberg coming in from Iowa State is in. What's your take so far? 4-2. What are we thinking?
My take on the team or Hoiberg?
Let's start with the team. Let's go with the team right now.
So it's essentially, just a recap for casual fans, it's essentially the same exact team from last year.
It is.
Sub out Nazir Muhammad, bring in rookie Bobby Portis from Arkansas.
Yeah.
And my thoughts going in were, this is a team that could use a change in style, both on offense.
It's something that needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, Thibodeau, I respect him a lot as a coach and a technician. I think he's, has very, very sound fundamental coaching. But, I mean, let's face it, he had a short rotation, and guys got worn out by the end of the regular season. That was a consistent theme. So bring in Fred Hoiberg, who's going to use more guys off the bench, who's going to run a
faster-paced style offense.
Yeah. And get this. So in the 3rd preseason game, the Bulls had 39 three-point attempts. That was 6 more than any game in the Thibodeau era. And that game in the Thibodeau era that had 33 was in triple overtime. So talk about taking more threes. I mean, this is just the way the league is going. So
yeah, it is. Well, if you look at the Golden State Warriors, how much they've revolutionized the style of play in the NBA with this little man basketball.
Yeah.
It's quite something to see, and other teams are taking onto it and catching along with it.
Yeah, so with the new philosophy and, the idea of having, more minutes to keep guys fresher, spread around, so far I would say the results are pretty good. I mean, we're 4-2. If you look at all the games we've played.
Can I just read you this roster real quick?
Yeah.
With how deep we are, and especially with our points per game, how deep that we do go.
Oh, yeah.
So we have Jimmy Butler, Nikolai Mirotic, Derrick Rose, Paul Gasol, Doug McDermott, Aaron Brooks, Tony Snell, Taj Gibson, Etuan Moore, and Joakim Noah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 10 players right there. All 10 of them played in all 6 games.
Mm-hmm.
And besides Joakim Noah, even Etuan Moore, they're all averaging 4 points or more per game. So if you have 9 players averaging 4 points or more, it just shows how evenly distributed and how depth of a team that we do have.
Yeah, I think the main component with that is, let's take a guy like Joakim Noah, okay?
Mm-hmm. Who's coming off the bench this year.
Coming off the bench, also coming off major knee surgery, sort of like under the radar major knee surgery.
Yeah.
So now we're going to have him, instead of having to start games, instead of, 2 years ago when he was all NBA, having to, be the facilitator and focal point of the offense. Yeah. Now he's basically coming in and doing what he did at Florida with fresher legs and better options to score. Yeah. So I think the move to the bench is going to end up being great for him, even though he might privately be, a little disgruntled with the role. Yeah. And it certainly paid off offensively so far because Mirotic is a rising star.
He's going to win Most Improved Player in the NBA this year. There's no question about it. If you look at his numbers, he's averaging 14 a game. It should even be higher. I know we've only played, 6 games this year, but even the first 2 games, he's had over 20 in every game, and he looks incredible.
One thing that Sam Smith brings up all the time, he writes for Bulls.com.
Yeah, the lead writer.
Yeah, he says that Powell needs to start because older guys like Powell, who's 35, they have a harder time if they don't start the game getting their legs warmed up. Yeah. So you might as well get them going early so then instead of basically freezing up on the bench and then having to come off and score. So with that in mind, I'm actually in favor of the Gasol-Mirotic combo because when it comes down to the end of the game, it's probably going to be Gibson and then one of those 3 guys in there. So whether it's Gasol or Mirotic or Noah, well, I guess they wouldn't do Gibson and Noah. It's probably going to be one of the 2. But either way, it's going to be an offensive and a defensive forward when it really matters.
So we retained Jimmy Butler in the offseason. What do you think of him so far? It's not looking like it was a 1-year fluke. The guy looks unreal on both sides, again, offense and defense.
Yeah, he really is one of, the all-time great out-of-nowhere success stories in the NBA.
Unreal.
This is a guy who was the 30th pick in the 2011 draft. This was the same Jimmy Butler who registered, I believe it was 8 did not play coach's decisions his rookie year. Mm-hmm. He didn't play at all. No. And now he's not only indispensable, not only, I don't hate to say it, our best player. Yeah. Both an all-NBA defender and a 20-point scorer who can assist and rebound. And this guy, I think he has a potential to be, a top 15, maybe even a top 10 player if this continues going on. So,
well, I think so too, because like you said, it's not only the over 20 points a game; it's what he does on defense as well. He's going over 2 steals per game, about 2.5, and that's leading to great offense for him as well. And let's face it too, he's not D'ing up any scrubs. He's going against the best players.
Last night he had to guard Kevin Durant, and he had 21 points in the first half. So how many guys in the league can do that? You could count them on one hand. It's basically LeBron, Kawhi Leonard could do that, and Jimmy Butler's one of those guys too. So we're really lucky to have him.
We are really lucky to have him. So, Derrick Rose, we know he had the broken bone in his eye socket. We're hearing, I know Wilbon keeps talking about he's having double vision, and Rose even told Wilbon he's having triple vision. Do you think that Rose should be playing if he's having double vision? I know he just had this unreal game last night, but what's your take on Rose right now?
Well, I would like to see Derrick Rose in more of a facilitator type role going forward. And obviously he had a great game last night at 29 points, but those games are kind of, few and far between for a guy like Rose at this point in his career. Going back to high school, he actually was known for passing the ball intentionally more than he should so that his buddies could get scholarships to college. And he had 0 points in the state title game. He only had a bunch of assists. He was the best player. So we know he's capable of doing it. And I just think with our talented roster of offensive players. He would be better served at this point, taking over games like that when he really feels like he has to, but more often than not looking to pass guys open.
Exactly, because when Rose was the MVP of the league a few years back, the Bulls did not have any other scorers. We didn't even have a shooting guard. More importantly, we had no inside scoring at all.
We actually had Keith Bogan start 82 games at one point. So
that was our starting shooting guard. But now, like we said, you have Jimmy Butler, who's arguably the best shooting guard both ways, players averaging over 21. You have this inside presence now with Paul Gasol, even Mirotic can play inside and out. So, like you said, the key component is Rose does not need to score here. And me and you agreed on this. We would like to see him go to the hole more, take more shots from in the paint than outside, but also when he does drive, kick it out to these shooters and offensive weapons that we have in Mirotic, in McDermott, Butler, Tony Snell. So, and even, I don't know if that'll happen, if Aaron Brooks is in there too. The point is all these guys can score.
Yeah, and we're not even mentioning Mike Dunleavy, who has yet to play this year, out with back surgery for the first couple months, but he's a great guy to come off the bench.
He is. He is our dark horse on our roster, and that was kind of weird how that all escalated because he had that surgery so late at the end of the year. You would have thought you would have had it done before.
Yeah.
But, yeah, main point is I really like what the Bulls are doing this year. I think they can go ahead, carry forward, and get a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, move on to the second round. But obviously, time will go along with that. Time will also heal a healthy Derrick Rose. So right now, give me, at the end of the game, what is the 5 that you would like to see in there at the end of the game?
So obviously, Rose and Butler are going to be in there, barring health, of course. And then I think you got to have Mirotic in there for the most part, just for the offensive versatility. That's going to be the toughest thing for Hoiberg going forward, is what to do at those 4 and 5 spots, because it's kind of like the hinge on a door. If you're going to have Mirotic in there, you pretty much can't have Gasol in there.
Yeah.
Same with, a guy like Gibson. So if you're going to have, a guy who's really only there for offense or only there for defense, that's going to affect the pairings that you're going to have. So right now, gun to my head, I would say you put Noah and Mirotic in there to close the game in the front court, and then at the 3 spot, that's where you kind of make your pivot for, okay, do we want a shooter like McDermott, or do we want a defender like Snell?
Or even a guy like Dunleavy.
I think when Dunleavy comes back, that will be his primary role.
Yeah.
Unless McDermott takes some big strides. He actually had a pretty good game on Sunday, that Magic game I was at. So, yeah, that's probably the only real murky spot right now, because we know that those 4 guys can play. And even Bobby Portis, who had a great preseason, I heard quite a bit about.
Yeah.
He won't be there in there at the end of the game, but that would be my 5 right now. What about you?
I would agree. I would say, obviously, you're going to have Rose, Butler. I would go Noah, especially because you need his defensive presence and energy. Just how big his energy is. It's one of the biggest X factors to me.
Sure.
But like you said, too, it's going to be, I would also say you're going to have Mirotic in there. And then, like you said, we'll see. It all comes down to who's having the hot hand. Do you need a scorer in there? Do you need a defender in there? But we'll see someone like Dunleavy who can do both. And he's got experience. He's proven that he can hit the big shot at the end of the game. So we'll see. I'll say the same 5 that you got, mixing those 3 guys in there. But
listen, you gotta love tall white guys named Mike.
Yeah,
that's really just what it's all about.
A tall white guy named Mike who can shoot. What's better than that?
Who might have a twin brother? Yeah, I mean, just these things are all details, but that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
So going forward, the Bulls play Minnesota. They go on to play the 76ers in Philly. We then have Charlotte at home. Tommy, thank you for doing this again with me.
Oh, thanks for having me. And guys, Don't forget to go on to YouTube and check out previous Windy City podcasts with myself and with Mike, or sometimes just with Mike. You never know what you can find.
And going forward, too, be looking to hear more podcasts from me and Tommy. But like I said, thank you for joining me in this segment we call Windy City Sports Podcast. I'm Mike Hansa. With me is Tom Doherty. Take care, everyone.